The story begins in a small village in Ukraine, where we see a cozy little house. In that house lived a loving couple, Mykola and Nastya, who were living a peaceful and happy life together. Nastya was an artist who carved small wooden figures, while Mykola worked as a schoolteacher, teaching math to kids at a nearby school. The students loved Mykola, except for one boy named Evan. Evan came from a rich family and was arrogant. Every day, he would try to annoy Mykola, making fun of his simple clothes and poor background. Evan wanted Mykola to lose his temper and hit him, so he could complain and get Mykola fired from the school. But Mykola was a calm and patient man. Evan's words didn't affect him at all. He stayed content with his simple life. There wasn't even a TV in his home, so he didn't know much about what was happening in the outside world. One day at school, he saw a news report on TV saying that Russia had invaded Ukraine, and many soldiers had already been killed. Several Ukrainian regions were now under Russian control. That evening, when Mykola came home, Nastya told him she was pregnant. Hearing that made him incredibly happy. He was going to be a father. The couple celebrated the joyful news together. The next morning, Mykola kissed his wife goodbye and left for school on his bicycle. On the way, he noticed two soldiers wearing strange uniforms. Their outfits didn't look like Ukrainian army uniforms. Mykola found it odd, but thought maybe the government had changed the design. Without thinking much, he went to school, but the place was completely empty. Not a single student had shown up. Something felt wrong. He turned on the TV again and saw breaking news confirming that Russian soldiers had entered Ukraine. That's when Mykola realized the soldiers he had seen on the road were actually Russians. His heart sank with worry, thinking about his wife, who was home alone. He jumped on his bike and rushed home as fast as he could, but it was too late. When he arrived, he saw those same two soldiers beating Nastya brutally. Mykola tried to fight them off, begging, "Please don't hurt her, she's pregnant." But they didn't listen. They kept hitting both of them. One of the soldiers searched the house, and when he found nothing valuable, he furiously set the house on fire. Seeing her home burn, Nastya snapped. In anger, she grabbed a rock and threw it at the soldiers. One of them pulled out his gun and shot her. Nastya collapsed to the ground, dead. Mykola was shattered. He ran to her, lifted her in his arms, and cried uncontrollably. A few hours later, two Ukrainian soldiers arrived. They saw Mykola's pain and tried to comfort him. The soldiers dug a grave for Nastya and told Mykola he could bury her there. After that, Mykola was completely alone. His home, his wife, and his unborn child, everything was gone. The only thing left inside him was a burning desire for revenge. His new purpose was to find and kill the Russian soldier who had shot his wife. He turned to the Ukrainian soldiers and said, "Take me with you. I want to join the army." The soldiers agreed and brought him to their military base in their jeep. Before leaving, Mykola picked up a small wooden figure his wife had carved. It was her last creation and his only keepsake, a token of memory and protection. When they arrived at the base, the commanding officer wasn't happy. He scolded the soldiers for bringing a civilian and refused to let Mykola join. He suspected Mykola might be a spy. But the soldiers explained everything, and Mykola himself told his story, how Russian soldiers destroyed his home and killed his wife. "I have no reason to live anymore," he said. "All I want is revenge." Hearing this, the officer finally agreed and allowed Mykola to join the army. His training began the next day. But since Mykola was a teacher, not a fighter, the training was tough for him. He had never handled or assembled a gun before. While others finished quickly, he was always the last one. Watching him struggle, the officer thought Mykola could never become a real soldier. But Mykola refused to give up. He trained harder every day, putting his heart into it. One night during training, he told his senior, "Don't call me by my name. My code name is Raven." Everyone laughed. The officer said, "You don't just get a code name. You have to earn it by doing something remarkable for your country." Mykola didn't take offense. Instead, he pushed himself even more. While others slept at night, he stayed awake, practicing and learning, determined to become strong enough to avenge his wife. One day, the senior officer gathered everyone and announced that they were short on snipers, and they needed to increase their numbers to fight the Russians more effectively. He asked who wanted to volunteer. A few soldiers stood up, and among them was Mykola. Seeing him, everyone laughed. The senior said, "You can't even assemble or disassemble a gun properly. Becoming a sniper is way out of your league." But Mykola confidently replied, "Sir, I can be a good sniper. Just give me one chance." The senior smirked and handed him a challenge. "Fine. You have 20 seconds to assemble this rifle." Mykola nodded, blindfolded himself, and began working quickly. In just 18 seconds, the rifle was fully assembled. Everyone watching was stunned. The same soldiers who had laughed at him now applauded. Even the senior officer was impressed and allowed Mykola to join sniper training. During training, everyone received modern rifles, except Mykola. He was given an old, worn-out model. When he asked for a newer weapon, the senior replied, "If you want one, you'll have to prove you deserve it." Mykola had no choice but to accept what he was given. During a briefing, the senior reminded everyone, a true sniper never moves, no matter what happens, and always keeps his sights locked on the target. To demonstrate, the senior fired a gun near the trainees to test their focus. Anyone who flinched would be kicked out. When Mykola's turn came, he didn't move a single inch. He stayed locked in position, eyes fixed on the target. He passed the test. The next drill was even harder. Each sniper was shown a target just once, then had their eyes covered with a blackboard. They had to rely on memory and instinct to take the shot. Some of the soldiers managed to hit their targets, but Mykola failed. His old rifle wasn't accurate enough for precision shooting. Everyone knew that if he'd had a modern gun, he would have nailed it perfectly. The next drill was tougher still. They had to shoot in the dark, using only the brief flash of light from a flare. When the senior fired the flare, everyone took their shots and missed. But Mykola realized something. The flare's light didn't last long enough for a direct shot. So instead of firing right away, he studied the distance and angle of the target during that brief flash. Using his math skills, he made a quick calculation and fired. His bullet hit dead center. Everyone was shocked. No one had ever completed that challenge before, but Mykola did. The senior officer was deeply impressed and finally gave him the code name Raven. Days passed, and Mykola continued to train with full dedication. Then came the day when the results were announced. The colonel saluted him and said, "Congratulations, soldier, you've passed." A few days later, the colonel returned and told everyone to pack their gear. They were being sent on their first mission. Russian soldiers had captured a Ukrainian checkpoint, and that's where the real story began. Mykola's team soon arrived at the location, took up positions, and prepared their scopes. Just as they were about to shoot, a vehicle approached the checkpoint. The colonel ordered everyone to hold fire. The Russian soldiers stopped the car, forced the passengers out, checked their passports, and searched the vehicle. After confirming everything was fine, they let the civilians go, but kept their passports. When the passengers asked for them back, the Russians began beating them. That's when the colonel gave the order to fire. Within seconds, all the snipers took their shots, taking down every Russian soldier. The mission was a complete success. When they returned to base, Mykola noticed that several of his fellow soldiers were missing. Concerned, he asked, "Where are the others?" He was told that another team had been sent on a separate mission. The next day, devastating news arrived. Most of them had been killed. A Russian sniper had taken them out. His name was Seri, and he was known as one of Russia's best marksmen. A few days later, Mykola headed out on his next mission with his squad. Once they reached the location, they planted mines all around and took their positions. Soon, a group of Russian soldiers arrived, and among them was Evan, the same boy who used to bully Mykola back in school. Evan had now joined the Russian army. When the colonel gave the order to shoot, Mykola froze for a moment. He couldn't bring himself to shoot his former student, but he quickly pushed his emotions aside and fired at the landmines instead. A massive explosion went off, killing all the Russian soldiers, including Evan. After the situation was under control, the colonel angrily asked Mykola, "What were you thinking when I gave the order to fire?" Mykola quietly replied, "One of those soldiers was my student. I didn't want to kill him." The colonel looked at him and said, "You don't need to feel guilty about Evan's death. Out there, he wasn't your student, he was your enemy. He chose to fight for Russia. His fate was his own choice." After that mission, the team returned to base. The colonel now trusted Mykola completely, and the two began spending more time together, not just as soldiers, but as brothers in arms. At this point, the colonel showed Mykola a photo of his family and told him he had two daughters. He said his girls had no idea that their father was a soldier. He'd told them he was a businessman, and even his wife had kept that secret from them. Hearing this, Mykola shared his own story, how Russian soldiers had brutally murdered his wife. His voice trembled as he spoke, and his eyes filled with tears, but the colonel placed a hand on his shoulder and comforted him. The next morning, the team headed out for another mission, an important one. They had intel that a group of Russian soldiers would be passing through a nearby route. The colonel and Mykola arrived early and took their positions. After a while, they spotted two Russian soldiers waiting for their unit. Mykola's heart froze. One of them was the same man who had shot his wife. He was right there, in Mykola's crosshairs. Mykola asked for permission to shoot, but the colonel refused. Rage burned inside him. That was the man he'd joined the army to find, and now he was right in front of him. Mykola asked again, but the colonel denied him a second time. Unable to control his emotions, Mykola pulled the trigger. The bullet hit its mark. The soldier fell dead on the spot. But the sound of that shot gave away their position. Furious, the colonel yelled, "What have you done?" The worst part, Russia's most feared sniper, Sari, was in the area, and now he knew exactly where they were. The colonel quickly realized Sari must be nearby, so he began scanning for his position. But before he could find him, Sari took a clean headshot. The colonel collapsed and died instantly. Mykola froze in shock. His reckless decision had just cost his commander's life. Russian troops started firing and bombing their position heavily. Chaos erupted all around. Seeing no other choice, Mykola decided to retreat. He carefully picked up the colonel's body and carried him out under heavy fire. After a long, grueling escape, he finally made it out of enemy territory and returned to base. The colonel's death weighed heavily on him. Mykola blamed himself and swore that one day he would kill Sari and avenge his commander's death. Some time later, Mykola got intel about two Russian snipers operating nearby. He immediately set out on a new mission. Once he arrived, he spotted both targets and took down one with a clean shot. But the second sniper fired back, hitting Mykola in the arm. Despite being badly wounded, Mykola stayed focused and managed to kill the second sniper too. Exhausted and bleeding, he made his way to a secret base, where he treated his wounds and rested. While recovering, Mykola received a call from a major. The major said, "We've located the sniper who killed the colonel." Mykola rushed back to the base, where the major briefed everyone. He confirmed that the sniper's name was Sari, the best marksman in the Russian army. His aim never misses, the major said. He's already taken down 6 of Ukraine's top snipers. Don't underestimate him. The major continued, explaining, Sari kills his targets and then records the kills on video, uploading them online to crush Ukrainian morale. He rarely changes position. He prefers to operate from the same spot, confident no one can reach him. Hearing that, they devised a plan. 2 assault teams would attack Sari's position. The first team would engage from the front to draw attention, while the second team would flank from behind. During the chaos, Mykola would infiltrate the building and take Sari down personally. Once the plan was finalized, everyone moved into position. The snipers set up their scopes and waited. Mykola quietly slipped inside the building. There, he spotted two Russian soldiers chatting casually. Without hesitation, he took both out silently and moved deeper in. Then, he sent a signal to his team, and the snipers outside opened fire. Within moments, all Russian soldiers outside were eliminated. Serry realized something was wrong. None of his men were responding. Suspicious, he climbed up to the roof. There, he found one of his snipers, already dead. Panic began to creep in. He understood the Ukrainians had surrounded him. He quickly called for backup, but it would take at least 10 minutes for reinforcements to arrive. Serry returned to his spot and began searching for the intruder. That's when he noticed a small wooden figurine on a table, the same one Mykola's wife had carved for him. Before Serry could react, Mykola attacked. A brutal fight broke out, hand-to-hand combat between two snipers. Mykola finally overpowered Serry and killed him with a knife. As the fight ended, another Russian sniper in the building spotted the scene and raised his weapon, but Mykola quickly threw a grenade, killing him instantly. Moments later, Serry's backup team arrived, unaware that their leader was already dead. They tried to contact him, but Mykola answered the call instead. Calmly, he said, "You're all going to die." Then he shot the driver of their truck. Gunfire erupted. The Russians panicked and jumped out, only to be met with Ukrainian snipers waiting outside. The Ukrainian forces opened fire and wiped out the entire Russian backup unit. Days later, Mykola visited his wife's grave. Standing there quietly, he whispered, "I kept my promise, I avenged you, and the colonel." He placed the small wooden figurine beside her grave and continued, "As long as I'm alive, I'll keep protecting my country." With that, he walked away into the fading light. And that's where the story ends. If you liked the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more, because true courage is born from pain, and heroes are forged in loss.